Aww.
To just the point of view, today's topic, the interesting topic, and we're going to deal with the topic of so-called blacks and their relationships with Asians. I'm not going to keep you long. I'm going to start this off with my personal experiences with the Asian community. When I was younger, all the stores which are identified across the United States as mom and pop stores, they were owned by so-called blacks, African Americans in our community. And then a wave of those stores being sold, and they was actually sold to, I believe at that time, the Koreans, who are Asians. And that was my first encounter with Asian people. In Washington, D.C., where I grew up at, in upper Northwest, not in the Georgetown area, but a midway point, I guess you can call it. It was segregated. I never went to school with an Asian person. I can't even recall going to school with a so-called white person or a Caucasian person. Not saying that I didn't, but if I did, they were so unnoticeable. I can't recall. I do recall one guy that was from, he was a Hispanic guy. South America, that's, I don't know where he was from South America. Good brother named Arnold. Remember him all the way from the second grade. Anyway, going into the Asian situation, what I have seen in the so-called black community is that the Asian people, there was, first of all, when they was planted there, possibly by the government, to cause confusion in black communities. And again, they got there. The owners of these black stores, they was offered money and they sold the stores. I have heard, as I was growing up, that a lot of these Asian families and things of that nature, they had gotten certain types of grants or loans that they didn't have to pay back from the United States government. And then once they got into the community, I would say personally, I think that the Asian people that I have encountered, they were nice people. But I have seen some interaction going to various different locations where that you can tell that these Asian people, after a while, from the Koreans' perspective, that they had some type of pre-perceived idea about so-called blacks in the type of communities that I grew up in. And that caused some type of division. Sometimes I go in the store and they would be arguing with so-called blacks. I don't know if the people they was arguing with, they were stealing or they was just being disrespectful. Regardless of what went on, those types of things were not unusual to see after a while. So-called black arguing and fussing and cussing at Asian store owners. And Asian people accusing blacks of stealing. That was one of the things that really started to light the wick of, the dynamite that was going to explode in the community. So another thing that I wanted to speak on is that Asians have been used as agents against so-called blacks. They had gotten information, I guess, or got, schooled not to, deal with so-called blacks in a certain type of manner. So I think the Europeans or the Caucasians used them and also indoctrinated them with a form of superiority with so-called blacks. And that's going to bring another, confrontation, because even though so-called blacks may be downtrodden, poverty, it's in our nature to be proud of ourselves. And, when someone to come to look down on you, to degrade you, thinking they're better than you, that's going to make most people go into defense mode. And defense mode easily, move into the attack mode. Again, the Asians having this white privilege past, even though they're not actually white, but they were given the identity of model citizens in a sense. And then this also gives some of them the notion to think that they are, better than so-called blacks, or look down on so-called blacks. And I'm saying all this to say, after the events that took place with the shooting at the massage parlors, and now the Asians they find themselves in a similar position of blacks, so-called blacks, being attacked or being terrorized by whites. And just before the attack took place, they was trying to bring about a narrative that the so-called blacks were very hostile towards Asian people, attacking them for various reasons. And yet, you don't see any blacks so-called blacks going on a mass shooting spree that anyone in the Asian community. They may have confrontation with them, cussed them out, maybe even, got in a brawl with them. And I'm not trying to promote this and saying that either one of the evils are justifiable, but when it came down to it, the real enemy of the so-called Asians was the ones that used them as pawns on the chess board of life. The so-called whites, with this white supremacy ideology, they try to rationalize the reason that the guy attacked, the Asian ladies and things of that nature, and also other innocent victims, was that he had a sexual appetite, and he felt that the Asian people were antagonizing him by their massage parlors. You can try to use that to somebody that don't have any sense to justify it. Even the police that, talked about it, he tried to dance around it, make the situation seem less violent, and that this man actually had a mental problem dealing with his desires for sex. That desire for sex, that is a personal joke. He couldn't control himself. Why? Because he was an animal in his thought process, and he let his animalistic thoughts manifest into murdering people without a cause. So again, I want to address the situation about the Asians and the so-called blacks. You're looking for black people, so-called black people, to come for you, but no, your employer, the so-called whites, they are the ones that came for you. And then you have a so-called Asians have a short memory span about what happened in Korea, Vietnam, Japan, so forth and so on. It was not so-called blacks that declared war against your countries and your fellow countrymen and your fellow Asians. It was European, Caucasian, so-called whites in America and throughout the white, so-called white family agreement on the planet. But no, you look down on the blacks. You want to have blacks under your feet, but you're being used, Asian people, and you need to wake up, because you've been drinking that European imperialism juice. But now you better realize one thing: once the so-called whites stop terrorizing so-called blacks, because blacks ain't going to keep taking it. We've been in here a long time. We know how they get down. And a lot of blacks are just ready to, handle the situations. But you know what? After they finish, there's another group of people they're going to come for. And maybe the Hispanics. But you better bet, Asians, you are on the list. And all I'm saying is to wake up and start to reading and studying and cross-examining the indoctrinated mindset that you have acquired from so-called white America. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in for Just a Point of View. And again, that's all this is just a point of view. This is my point of view. I'm not saying that this is law or anything of that nature. I am open for information and comments to give me another perspective to consider about the relationships between so-called blacks and Asian people. Everybody, do your homework and stop listening to the information of Caucasian white Americans. And it's not all whites that are, have this devilish intent for people that's other than themselves. It's not all Asians that interact with so-called blacks in a hostile type of way. But we got to address the issue, because the ones that are not doing it, you need to bring it to the attention of the ones that are doing it, that they need to check themselves. And that's all I'm saying. Just the point of view. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a blessed day on purpose, with purpose, because life is all purpose. Peace.